Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Josh Kraushaar is with Axios. He's got a great story out right now called the GOP's 2024 Freeze. Good morning, Josh. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh.
Now, I've just teased your great story on Axios, and now I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to talk to you instead about the Fairfax County scandal and the suppression of the national merit commendations, which began at one school, then became three schools when I talked to Glenn Youngkin last week, is now up to seven schools. Are you following this?
Well, Hugh, I live in Fairfax County. I grew up in Fairfax County, so I have a deep familiarity about the issue at hand. And look, Fairfax County has always been something of a, at least until the last 5 years, has been a swing area. Now it's Democratic, but it's a moderate Democratic area. And the school system was always based on having the best schools in the country. Excellence was the motto in Fairfax. And in 2019, the school board slate that won, the Democratic endorsed school board slate, ran instead on equity. That was the motto. You saw it on signs across the area. And what we're seeing, and this is one example of what's going on, is you're seeing evidence that in school systems across the country, or sorry, in schools in the schools in Fairfax, including the number one school in the country, the Thomas Jefferson School of Science and Technology, they've been taking measures to essentially downgrade their excellence. They're not highlighting the highest achievers in the school system. We saw this during COVID. There were a lot of instances where Jefferson is under fire because they changed its admissions policy. They got rid of the high standards in its test that would allow the top students to get into the school in favor of some kind of racial balancing. So this is a big issue. It goes beyond just the merit scholars that didn't get notified in the school system, but it's about this emphasis on equity over merit.
And that the reason I'm focused on this is I don't what begins in Fairfax County doesn't stay in Fairfax County. There are some elite school districts around the United States, and that's one of them. Now I've got a handle to grab onto. What does equity mean? Equity means not telling people, specifically the Asian American students who did very well on the national merit test, that they did very well. Has it made it into the national media yet, Josh, other than on my show? I'm following it intensely because I think parents are going to lose their minds if they find out that their high schools did this.
Well, look, education was one of the big factors that got Governor Youngkin into the governor's mansion. It was a whole slew of educational issues: the school closures during COVID, some kind elements of radical curriculum seeping into the schools. But equity was a big factor too. The fact that Thomas Jefferson, the number one school in the country, a magnet school, got rid of its high stakes admissions test in favor of quotas, racial quotas, essentially, to balance the diversity or to balance the ethnic population in the school. Very unpopular, created a groundswell of opposition. And I think what we're seeing here, Hugh, is another example, another possible bullet point in this equity agenda, where
Yeah,
merit
but
is
what
highlighted.
I'm getting at is, you're a parent, right? Are you concerned about this? I mean, do you see this engulfing school systems and injuring your children?
I see this in fits and starts. I don't think it's endemic, but I think you're right to note that once something is kind of in the bloodstream, so to speak, it can spread very. We saw this during the pandemic, and a lot of very unusual ideas kind of creeped into the school system. That was one of the issues again that Governor Youngkin talked about during the 2021 campaign, and it had an audience not just of conservatives, but of independents, of moderates. There's school board elections, by the way, Hugh, throughout Virginia, in Fairfax County, Loudoun County. That's going to be a really interesting data point into how much of a backlash there is to this equity movement.
Now, this is where I want to conclude, Josh. And by the way, the GOP's 2024 freeze, the long and the short is people got to know what DeSantis is doing before they start doing what they want to do, right?
That's exactly right. They want to see if he's a formidable force in the Republican Party or a paper tiger, and they don't know. They don't. So far, so
I
good. They're
notice you
communicating.
mentioned this book, Mike Pompeo's book, the new memoir, Never Give an Inch. It's the most explosive and best memoir of the Trump years. Have you read it yet?
I have not. I'm looking forward to it. But I know the Secretary of State is going to be I guess it's coming out in about a week, and he's going to be going around the country talking about some of
Yeah,
the.
don't bring a knife to a gunfight when in the memoir wars. I mean, that's
You
it.
think
But I want to go back. Go ahead.
No, I'm
So,
sure, but what are the big revelations?
oh, I can't tell you because it's embargoed.
Okay.
Okay, so you know the rules. But I will. There are a lot of stories. It's going to make a lot of news. Josh, has any national network or legacy media outlet focused on the Northern Virginia scandal yet? You know, like everyone's covering the documents, Joe Biden's documents. I want to know if this has traction in the national media yet.
Well, look, the Washington Post actually has covered it in recent days. So the Metro section, at least, the front page of the local section of the Washington Post, which I think is notable because it was a little bit slow in the uptick and some of the other educational related controversies that were mentioned on the campaign trail in Virginia.
I think it's an enormous story. It's we finally have a vision of what equity means, and it means hurting Asian Americans. That's what it means, and we're going to continue talking about that. Josh Kraushaar on Twitter. Read him at Axios. Thank you, Josh. Always a pleasure to see you on a Monday morning. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.